And thank you very much for inviting myself and my colleague Di along. Just listening to that last presentation has really highlighted some of the thoughts I've had about thinking about mental health in the workplace. So what is mental health? I do hope that you'll have copies of the slides. I think you were meant to have them, but if not, if you want any of them, please do let us know. I apologise for reading this out, but I wanted to set the scene about what mental health is. And the World Health Organization describes mental health as not just the absence of a mental disorder, but is defined as a state of well-being in which every individual realises his or her own potential, can cope with the normal stresses of life, can work productively, and is able to make a contribution to her or his community. And thinking about all of the difficult tools that anybody in the construction industry works with, if you're not feeling quite right, you're at a massive risk from the moment you start going to work. Can I just make sure that's it? So what is mental health on the Isle of Wight? We have a population of about 140,500 people at the last census, and obviously with festivals, summer times, that population does rise. We've got 5,998 people are recorded in their GP as having a diagnosis of depression. That's a lot of people. And then we also have 1,467 people who have severe and enduring mental health problems. And if I'm perfectly honest with you, I think those figures are probably higher. These are people that have actually gone to their doctor and those have actually sought advice. There are probably lots and lots of other people who don't go and speak to their doctors or their nurses or anywhere else. When I was asked to do this presentation by Councillor Nicholson, and I really do feel that this is a first step in the right direction of highlighting mental health issues within the construction industry, I was quite surprised at how taboo the subject actually is within the construction building environment. So I spoke to my colleagues thinking, well, it's men, isn't it? Men don't talk about how they feel, they don't talk about things to each other. You know, you just don't want to have those conversations, whereas us ladies are probably more open about how we feel today, how we're feeling emotionally, etc. And when you're in a high intensity environment, you've got deadlines to meet, you need to get on with your work, you've got to get things. Your own personal mental health is probably not something that you're particularly thinking of. I had a look at some of the studies and I couldn't find an awful lot actually. There wasn't an awful lot of research out there. But 85% of people that they spoke to felt that the industry didn't do enough to address mental health in the workplace. So having an event like this and asking us to talk about it is a huge, great thing that we're actually doing. That was from 2006, but more recent research from America said that about 3% were actually showing signs of clinical suicide risk. And that's massive, that's really quite shocking. And these are people that are just general, everyday construction workers. But this was the bit that I found that actually not seeking professional help. So alongside the visible dangers of physical injury and fatality, you've also got all the other things that are going on unnoticed, your actual mental health, physical signs, of which Di is going to go on to speak about later. But I really just wanted to make sure that everybody was aware of the prevalence of mental health in the workplace and the problems that having somebody with you who has, whether it's low level or high level, how you can help them and how you can help them to manage it, and also your own mental health too. And construction has a really bad history of mental health. As I said earlier, it seems to be a very taboo subject to actually talk about. Lots of the issues that are experienced, you know, all the financial challenges, keeping businesses going, and then the construction industry hopefully now building up again. Again, that is a stressful thing on the opposite side of that as well. It is a male-dominated industry. We can't get away from the fact it's statistically known that men are just really bad at talking about health or finding out and sorting out their own health. And actually, all of these things together compound how bad these symptoms can actually become. And the seriousness of the problem, it's not something that we can laugh about. I can't emphasise this enough, that construction has not historically had a culture of open discussion when it comes to mental health. And this was quite evident with the research that I did find. the potential severity, or how to tackle them. So tackle those issues, whether they're just low-lying or high-end mental health issues. So how can we help ourselves and our colleagues? This is where I hand you over to my colleague Di.
Hello, good morning. My name's Di, as you can see, and I work in occupational health across the road at St Mary's, where I've been, I think, now for 22 years actually in that department. I very quickly learned that stress was a very big part of the role, and as any public sector and everywhere now, it's a very increasing issue. The pressures, I think, all round, inside, out of work, have increased dramatically. So it's something I've always had a special interest in, and have developed, I suppose, over the years. So it's very nice to come and talk to you today. So what I'm going to do is just talk a bit about what actually is stress, how we recognise it, both in ourselves and I think in other people as well, because that's where quite often it's someone else that notices that you're not being quite yourself and things aren't quite right. What the sources are, where does stress come from, and what can we do about it? And then how we build our resilience. And I think that's very much an individual thing. Over the years, I think it's about each one of us really has to kind of develop our own menu recipe, if you like, of what works for us, which is going to be very different from somebody else. So, stress versus pressure. I mean, a bit of pressure is actually quite good, and it's something that comes from outside, and is usually quite motivating and energizing, so up to a certain point. Stress is the response that we have when the pressure actually gets too much, and it tips over into an uncomfortable level for us. So it's a continuum really, where we've got not much pressure leading up to a little bit tension, strain and stress. I mean, stress was very much an engineering term, I think, long before it related to people. And those of you, obviously, you'll know really what stress means as an engineering thing, and it's the same for us. So, what is stress? Here's a kind of a definition. I always like to think of it, it's a balance really. It's a response which occurs when there's an imbalance between demands we've got on one side and then our perceived ability to cope with that on the other. So out of that, which do you think is a really important word in that paragraph?
Imbalance.
Perceived.
Yes, perceived, absolutely. Imbalance obviously is important, but the perception, we'll come back to that in a minute, but that's actually a really key thing. So that's it. We've got our pressures on one side, our demands on one side, and then our ability, our own perceived ability to cope on the other. And it's keeping that, it's going to swing up and down, but it's about keeping that in movement really, and coming back to a nice equal balance. So just coming back to the perception, and so what do we mean by that? It's actually, I mean, our senses are very important because they're unconsciously, all the time, are scanning our horizon really for what we think, what's going on, so it can alert us to any danger. So it's our best well-informed guess at what we think we're seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting or touching in a given situation. And it can be, it's interesting, I don't know, how many of you have got dogs? Right, go walk. Have you been walking in the evening after work? I went out the other night actually, it was amazing because it was about 9 o'clock and the moon, I think it was full moon, wasn't it, quite recently? So I went up the hill where I live and it was just peeping over the hedge. It was beautiful, but it was kind of a twilight, really interesting. And so just walking up, I'm very lucky because I'm quite near, I can go up on the downs just across the road. And just along by the hedge, there's like a wavy thing, you know, and I think, oh my God, my first impression, what I think I'm seeing, is that a snake? And it's not moving, the dog's not taking any notice, so I think, naturally get closer, and it's a stick. So, but what happens is our brain pattern matches, and it comes up with what we think is going on at any time. And it's a very sloppy process, and sometimes it can be way out on that. So we have that ability to, we've got the emotional response and then that thinking bit that says, no, it's okay, it's not something you need to worry about. So our perception is very important. And of course, that's going to be very different for each of us. So things aren't always what they seem. And if it's something that sparks off an alarm in us, so our senses are scanning our horizon, anything that we might think is going to be a threat or a danger to us, and I'm sure you've all heard of the fight or flight response. So this is, as I said, our senses are like gatekeepers of our security and well-being. That happens at an unconscious level. So all the time, we'll be kind of vaguely aware of the noises going on outside the room. I mean, if the fire alarm suddenly went off or we started to smell smoke, then our senses would be it would alert us to that we need to act and do something quite quickly. So it's flashed past a little gland in our brain called the amygdala, which acts like our security guard. So that's the one, and if that one is, it senses something that we need to be aware of, it will let us know, and that will spark off the fight or flight response. It has that ability then to be checked out by our thinking part of your brain. If you like, the amygdala is a bit like our emotional brain, so it's like telling us there's a problem. We can check that out with our head office, if you like, which is our thinking part of our brain. And if it's considered a threat, so if it is like smoke or there's some rowdy or fight starting or something's happening, then the fight or flight response will follow. And that's, for those of you like technical things, fantastically complex organ, obviously our brain, but the bits that are kind of involved, I suppose, in the stress response. It's this little gland here, the amygdala, and that's the security guard watching out for any sign of threat or danger. And it also, what it does very quickly is it actually flashes that past the hippocampus, which is a bit like our filing. It's our own personal filing cabinet where we've got our memories. So it's like, have I recognised this before? Has something like this happened before? Is it something that I need to be concerned about? And that will be a problem for somebody, particularly if they've had a very severe experience on something like, or even a post-traumatic stress, because then if they come across anything that the brain matches, that it reminds them of, it will spark off that fight or flight response in response to that. But then that will be checked out by our thinking cortex up the top there. Is this something I need to be worried about? And if it isn't, we can say, no, it's okay. It's not a stick. It's a snake, it's a stick. So it's like we all have our own personal castle, really, that we're protected inside, and we've got all these systems really looking for signs of danger. So if the emotional response is strong enough, it will always dominate. So it's like we have like a hierarchy of emotions, and the one that's the strongest is going to be the one that will dominate. But we also have the thinking brain to question, do we need to be alarmed? So is it a snake or a stick? I'm just going to show you, I keep this on my desk actually at work, and it's just a way I find of showing to people. It's a bit like that difference between our emotional side and our thinking side. And if the emotional response, so if the emotional bit really is like the sediment on the bottom, and our thinking brain likes to have the emotions out the way so that we can, think, concentrate, make decisions and so on. When that's stirred up, that's what happens to our ability to make decisions. It's perfectly normal. When it happens, you actually think you're going a little bit mad, but it's actually a very normal response. So when we get stressed, that's what happens. We get stirred up, and it affects our ability to think clearly and function as we would like to. So just coming back to the fight or flight response, what happens is adrenaline. Basically what happens is your body turns into a chemistry set. So you get this kind of rush of hormones and chemistry starts whizzing around your body. At a low level, that's actually quite nice if you're doing something new, or you're doing a sport, or you're doing something exciting, or you're doing it for the first time, starting a new job, something that you're motivated about. That can actually be quite pleasant. So at a get up and go level, it's good. And even then, when medium levels, it's okay. And we're very sharp then, because we're really on the ball, we're focusing. we can deal with new challenges and learn new things. And it's quite a necessary thing sometimes to keep us motivated. So that's when the balance is okay. But when it then gets to the point of it's too much, like suddenly you become out of your comfort zone, and that's when it becomes quite uncomfortable. And that will tip then into the fight or flight response, which will start that acute stress response. And it's like, I don't like this. This has gone over into something that I'm not happy with. So over a long period of time, there are two like stress responses really. You've got the acute short-term one over an event, and then you may have something that's ongoing over a long period of time, and that's where our health can then start to suffer over time. So the acute, the short-acting one, could be something like a job interview, taking a driving test, an exam, something like that, something that's got like a beginning, a middle and an end, and you know it's gonna have an ending. So what happens? Our mind's really very sharp, so we're hopefully, unless you're so nervous that all that's all clouded. I mean, it's a bit like stage fright. You know, people will get so stressed that they actually can't remember their words on stage. So the pupils dilate, your mouth can get dry, you'll get sweaty palms, raised heart rate and breathing. Might want to go to the loo again, classically before going in for an interview, for example. Your blood pressure rises, and that could be an example of that. So what's happening is that your body is on red alert, ready to go. If you think about fight or flight, it's a very physical activity. So it's, and what happens is the pupils dilate, so we've got good long-term vision. We're thinking kind of prehistoric here almost really, like, you know, thinking back to the caveman days where we would need to have, we'd need very sharp responses in dealing with a dangerous situation. Our heart rate, so we're getting ready for action. Empty the bowels, go to the loo, so that's out the way, so we're ready to act. Blood pressure rising, say it's all ready for action, so we're on red alert. And hopefully, after like a short-term sort of situation, that's all going to return to normal once the event is over. But life isn't like that, is there? And we tend to have a lot of ongoing stresses in our life that don't have like a beginning, middle, or an end. So that's what happens. On a more chronic, so a longer term type situation, that will affect us both physically, emotionally, and in our behaviour as well. So again, we've got the raised blood pressure, but that can actually then, it isn't like a short-term thing, that can stay up over time, and we might then even experience palpitations, and not necessarily when we're busy doing things. It might be when you're sitting watching telly in the evening and you're quite quiet and you think, ooh, that's funny. Just kind of like, feels like things just lurched a bit sideways or my heart missed a beat. Headaches, dizziness. I think we all have our own particular weak spots quite often, and our own Achilles heel, if you like. So some people will tend to suffer from the headaches and the migraines, or may even have dizzy attacks. Raised blood sugar, and again, the raised blood sugar, that's a short-term acting thing because your body needs that energy to do that, run away or fight your predator, so it's giving you the energy to do that. Skin is like, you know, one of the largest organs in our body, and that's can be very active. So some people will suffer from, if you're prone to eczema, psoriasis, that sort of thing, then quite often your skin can react. Asthma, the allergic type reactions. Some people have the stomach and the bowel problems, the irritable bowel, or the which can get a bit out of hand. But generally, what we suffer from is a generalised kind of muscle tension. And if you spend time in one position, I mean, like you could be on a job, for example, that's particularly ergonomically bad. So you're either down in a corner or you're up at height or you're stretching, or if you're at a computer a lot of the time during the day and you get the terrible kind of achy neck and shoulders. So they kind of tend to go hand in hand in a way, the muscle tension and the stress, because if we're stressed, we tend to hold tension in ourselves anyway, so they're quite often linked. And over a period of time with stress, our immune system takes really quite a bashing, and then we'll be prone to everything that's going. So you'll catch all the colds that are going, all the stomach upsets, etc. And you might notice that in your workers as well, the short-term frequent absence where they've always gone off with, they've got a cold, or they've got migraine, or they've got, they've got a stomach upset, particularly if they've got kids. So the kids bring things home from school and round it goes. So we are more prone generally. So that could be a long-term event, and that could be anything from relationship problems, money problems, ill health, a whole list of our ongoing stresses in life. And then we can end up feeling exhausted. So how do we recognise then some of the more emotional behavioural things? Withdrawn, it's basically people who are not generally themselves. So if they tend to be quite chatty and outgoing, you might notice that they're quite withdrawn, or they're not keen to talk to people, might be a bit moody or snappy, angry. And we get into what we call kind of black and white thinking, where everything's awful, everybody hates me, nothing ever works out for me. It's a bit global. So, and we don't see the grey areas particularly, so we tend to get in a black and white thinking mode. Feeling of anxiety, so that can be anything. We've got the sort of the raised heart rate, we may be having palpitations, and just a generalised feeling maybe around here. I mean, it can be physical. Some people just actually feel it more in their mood and their heads, which can manifest even as panic attacks. And panic attacks can take any kind of form. Anything from, I just don't want to do things, and I feel that I can't breathe. They can be from like pain, can get really bad pain, headaches, and I've known people actually just pass out and have complete blackouts. The breathing one is a classic where, and that's kind of like it sort of escalates and gets out of control, so that our heart rate's kind of raised and our breathing, so we do a lot of breathing in and not much breathing out. I'll come back to that a bit later on, because I've got a very good breathing technique to deal with that. Sleep. Disturbed sleep is sometimes the first kind of sign, really, the first signature that we're on that slippery road. Either of not being able to get off to sleep at night when you go to bed, or falling asleep and then waking up like 3 or 4 hours later and then not being able to get back to sleep, or just waking up really early, and disturbed sleep. Dreams, nightmares can come into that too. Our altered appetite and eating, smoking, alcohol, generally all those kind of consuming habits can be very different. Some people will eat loads and comfort eat. Some people will actually just stop eating, or everything they eat will just kind of go through, so they'll lose weight or put on weight. Smoking and alcohol habits can increase as a comfort factor. And it can then start to spread into our relationship problems, both at work with colleagues, but also at home. And we can have problems in the personal department. I'd sum it up really by saying that you're not yourself, and that's really how you'd recognise it in somebody else, or in your colleagues would be, or your workers would be, that they're really not themselves. And it's a difficult thing to approach and say, particularly in the sort of industry you work in as well, because it's not something that's easily talked about. And I think one of the ways of actually talking to someone perhaps is to say, are you okay? You just don't seem yourself at the moment, which is just like an opening question. If they want to talk, then perhaps that might open the door to that. So coming back to the snowstorm thing, it's the muddled thinking. So poor concentration. When the emotions are stirred up, that really interferes with our thinking part of the brain, if you like, that clarity. So we have this sort of pea soup brain where we can't concentrate, we forget things, we've got very muddled thoughts, we can't make decisions, and it takes us much longer to actually do things and achieve our tasks. So where does stress come from? You tell me, where does it come from? Where does your stress come from? Work, home, all over? Variety of places, doesn't it? Both. It's a mixture of both. And it's very difficult to separate that out, because if someone's having a really bad time at home in their personal life, it's quite difficult to shut the door and leave that at home when you come into work. Likewise, that happens the other way around. Usually, if there's a bit of respite in one area or the other, people can cope with that. So if work's awful but home's good, or the other way around, then they quite often will manage. But when you've got a problem in both areas, that's quite a recipe for a disaster, really. And people will quite often become unstuck there. So classically, major life events, so that's things like, death, illness, relationship problems, breakups, divorce, being in trouble with the law, prison. There's a list, actually. Holmes and Ray came out with a list a long time ago, I think it was in the 60s. And at the top of there is like death of a partner, divorce, etc. Christmas is somewhere on the list down there. I'd actually move it further up personally. And there's also lots of change. So things like moving house, if you change jobs, or like I always think about people who move to the island for a job because they will have like moved house, changed jobs, kids will have gone to new schools. If the wife's working, there'll be so much change going on. And we don't cope with a lot of change very well. We can cope with like small doses of it, but when you get it like London buses where they all come at once, that last thing, one on its own you'd probably cope with quite well, but that last thing sometimes can be quite small, but it's that thing that just really trips you up, and it's that straw breaks the camel's back. So multiple changes, a lot of things. So you need to be kind to yourself if you've got a lot of change going on in your life, and just being aware of that. Illness of self or others can be a very stressful thing. Family, money, relationships, lack of skills, knowledge, support, doing a job that actually you've not really had the proper training for can be very stressful. And then we create an awful lot of stress ourselves, actually, by the way we use our thought processes. So ruminating, like use of imagination, it's a great tool, isn't it? Because we've got this ability to plan. We're the architects of our own demise sometimes. So bad things happened, how much time do we want to spend going over it again and again and again and again? So we ruminate over things sometimes, and then we worry about what hasn't actually happened yet, something that's coming up in the future. So, and the now bit tends to be, really, really small. We don't spend much time in the now. And you may have heard there's a lot now in the media and around about mindfulness, and mindfulness is about being in the now. It's about being here, now, using your senses to sort of take in, just being in this room where we are, or when you're going for a walk, when you take the dog out after work, notice things, smell the air, look at the colours, and take it in, being in the moment. It's very easy to do that and think about what you're going to be doing tomorrow, or gosh, what happened today, and actually then you're back home and didn't really notice where you went. And it's about being in the moment. So our own imagination, just having a check on how good we are with that or not. I find, over the years, creative people generally suffer a lot more because they've got brilliant imaginations and they can imagine whatever you like. They can imagine the worst, the best, etc. So healthy ways to manage stress. Lots of things. Talking is good. Talk to someone, making use. GPs, counselling is available. We're coming back to that at the end, I think, of what's available, aren't we, generally on the island through like GP networks and how you can self-refer. But a lot of it is down to how we manage ourselves and managing your time, booking holiday, making sure you've got time off, planning time for yourself, being more assertive, taking exercise, relaxation time, humour. Humour's really important, isn't it? Doing something you enjoy, learning something new, and then the lifestyle issues, like that. But out of that, so what do you think is one of the best antidotes to stress? There's a bit of a clue there.
Exercise.
Yeah, because it's in bold and italics, isn't it? Yeah. Why is that?
Releases endorphins.
It does, yes. There's kind of like another. Also, if you think about the fight or flight response, it's a very physical thing, isn't it? Because you're either going to leg it and run like hell, or you're going to actually stand and fight. So it's a very physical process. And exercise is using up the chemistry. So basically what it does is it uses up the chemistry, and if you're exercising pretty hard, you then go on to get the endorphin bit as well, which is great. I've heard that chocolate actually does the same thing, but So it uses up that chemistry for the purpose it was intended to do, something physical like run away or fight. So, which is great. I always think the two ways of tackling stress really for a personal, like getting your own personal menu, is doing something physical. So take some exercise and doing something that will actually use up some of that energy, that chemistry, and then something relaxing at the other end. So you want to do something physical and something that you really enjoy and that's relaxing at the other end, which could be anything, you know. I mean, sport. How many of you play sport or take exercise on a regular basis? Yeah. And if you don't do it, do you miss it? Yeah. Yeah, because you actually learn, don't you, that that's part of feeling better. That actually is the part thing that makes you feel, keeps you intact and keeps your balance. So those are kind of some of the healthy ways. There are lots of unhealthy ways to manage our stress as well, and probably ignoring it is quite a serious one, and being in denial. And we're very good at that, aren't we? And that's often when it's somebody else that's noticing that things are not right. Because it's, you know, it's not easy to actually fess up that you're not coping with something, or that you've got these awful anxiety feelings, and even maybe that you've had a panic attack. You know, it's common, believe me. Probably our most common one is alcohol or drugs, even, to take the edge off, because
I
it's
think
that.
Actually, as a counter, because a lot of the ones who are the most stressful are the ones who have taken too many drugs.
This is the unhealthy ways, yes,
Yeah,
that's right.
Manage stress, but they're the ones who actually are
Oh.
the worst ones.
Yes.
Paranoia. And
absolutely. Yes, that's it.
people who are being regular
Trouble is,
cannabis users are
yes,
by far.
yes. What happens is we have a kind of a naturally addictive process, because when we do something that makes us feel good, it produces like our brain produces its own kind of cocaine, if you like. So what happens is that we get used to it. We think, oh yeah, that's good, I like that. Eating, you know, some people eat for comfort. They get it's the same process. So what happens is that we get that habitual reward, if you like, to get that brain reward for doing something. And it's about getting our needs met, isn't it? I mean, we were talking about that the other day, like, you know, Carol's got a big dog. If it goes for lots of walks and gets enough exercise, it's fine. If it doesn't, you know, they get quite destructive, don't they? I mean, we're the same. If we get our needs met in the right proportions, we can actually maintain a level of health. What we do now, and it's very common, as you say, drugs, alcohol, marijuana, smoking cannabis, it's because it's available and it's there, we get our needs met in ways that are available, but actually compound the problem, because, as you say, it brings on certain problems. People can get very paranoid, and there's a lot. I mean, you need to talk to people who work in mental health. You know, there's a lot of drug-induced problems.
Well, I thought it was quite humorous. Must have been a year or so ago when the government study said that marijuana didn't have any effect on mental health.
I think that's changed.
What?
That's changed. That's
Yeah,
definitely
it was
changed.
just laughable
Yes.
when they
Yeah.
said that.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
so he's not an expert. You just know that's.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's a big problem, isn't it? It is a big problem. And I mean, apart from, as I say, I mean, the whole thing of heights, I mean, the whole concept of like tools falling off, I hadn't had to say that was something that I hadn't really thought about. I mean, I haven't worked in the construction industry, but, you know, drugs, you've got somebody who's got the effects of drugs up at heights and with tools. Yeah, it's a problem.
The marijuana one carries on years after they come off it.
Well, it can do, because it can actually produce alters the brain and the pathways in the brain, so that you. Yeah.
Oh, well, we've avoided enough of them. You know, you can spot one a mile off.
Yeah. So hopefully, for the rest of us, it's probably down to like caffeine and you know, other ways. It can be compulsive anything. Some people get into compulsive exercise, you know, again, because that's a way of actually making them feel better. We can get into compulsive anything. Yeah, computer games. Yeah, exactly. I know someone who said, God, they wasted 2 years of their life on computer games because they just couldn't stop doing it. And spending, you know, there's nothing like a bit of retail therapy, is there? And then, of course, we've got such easy online access, and with phones and that now, gambling can be a big problem. So those are some of the unhealthy ways. I just pop this in, actually, because also what we tend to do, apart from creating our own stress, sometimes we get drawn into other people's stress. And this was just something really interesting that someone introduced to me a while back, whereby, and it's called the drama triangle, and quite often, and there's always 3 roles played in that. So we've got the victim, the persecutor, and the rescuer. And what we tend to do, people who work in the NHS are very commonly rescuers. We go in there and we try and sort out problems because we want things to be better. We want to help people and make them better. But what often happens is that you then end up being the persecutor, and then you end up feeling like the victim. It's very difficult to go into a drama like that, somebody else's drama. And you probably all know someone who comes into work, or, you know, they've always got a problem, they've always got something going on, and you get sucked into their situation sometimes. And the best place to be on that is actually on the outside, and perhaps just to give a bit of advice from arm's length. But I found that quite useful. I just thought I'd throw that in. So resilience, as I mentioned earlier, I think we all need to develop our own personal recipe, if you like, of what works for us. You know, and it could be what one person likes could be something somebody else hates. So think about the exercise and the relaxation end, things that you enjoy. And I often find now that when I speak to people who are, particularly as you know, life takes over, you have kids, jobs, the things that you used to do, you stop doing because you haven't got time really, or the kids take over and so on. And it's actually thinking about what did you used to do that you really enjoyed. And it could have been like playing a sport or having a hobby or doing something that you really enjoyed, but you stopped doing it years ago. And those are the things to look at. What works for you, and trying to build that into your life. So the resilience really is the capacity to recover quickly from difficulties. So, you know, life knocks us down. It's life, you know, if it was a job description, we'd never apply for it, would we, probably? But it's our inner strength helping to bounce back after experiencing adverse events. It's like the rubber band, so it gets stretched, but when you let go, it goes back to the shape that it was. And by doing this, we build a sense of purpose. We do this by building a sense of purpose. So a sense of purpose, like a goal, you know, if you need a plan, don't you, to build a building or an aeroplane or whatever it might be, or if you're going travelling, you need a map, you need to know the route where you're going. Again, our brain works on a pattern matching thing, so if we've got an idea of what the end result's going to look like, then we're much more likely to get there and for it to be successful. Social support, use your support networks, and being adaptable. So when things don't work out the way that we planned, you know, we have to adapt to life how it is. And trying to build our confidence. Confidence is linked very much with self-esteem, assertiveness, that sort of thing. And it's not something you can just turn on a switch. I mean, it's like things you feel confident about are generally things that you've done many times, you know, like you've done it loads of times before. It's fine, I feel confident about doing that. So that's how they're built up. So again, it's your own personal reservoir. What do you need to put in that to keep it topped up so you can cope with what life throws at you? So the employer, what can the employer do? Are there any stress at work regulations? No. It all comes under health and safety at work, management of health and safety at work regs. And again, it comes down to risk assessment. And of course, it's always going to be different on how you assess stress as a risk. I mean, just to give an example, for example, in the trust, in the hospital, we know that areas such as perhaps ambulance, A&E, ITU are going to carry quite, they're going to have quite extreme circumstances, you know, of like major accidents, or, you know, the ambulance guys, Friday, Saturday night, I wouldn't want their job, you know, it's a high stressful thing. So you kind of know where the higher risks are going to be. So it's just thinking perhaps what are the most stressful situations at work, and then offering training and support. Early referral for advice. So the sooner you can recognise that in someone or in yourself and seek support, then the less likely it is to then progress onto something more chronic. Mindful employer, and that's, I mean, you can look at all that online. So as a company, you can join up to, you can look at what that entails, and it's a lot of information on there about how you can help on the mental health side. And then the HSE have an excellent tool for stress. I've been using that tool probably for about the last 15 years, I think. Started off in the council actually, and then we use it now in the trust, and it divides the stresses up into what they call the management standards. So what are the demands made on people? How much control or autonomy do they have over the job that they're doing? What sort of support do they have? So that's support both from the manager and then from their colleagues, peer support. Relationships, so that's about behaviours and how do people treat each other, you know, is it the culture? And then the role, how much do they understand what's expected of them at work? What does their role entail? How does that fit into the bigger picture? And then when changes are made, how much involvement do they have in the process of change? And there's actually a very good self-evaluation tool on there as well for the manager to do. It's a bit like a 360-degree thing, doing it on yourself. Okay, so I was just going to tell you about the breathing technique. So going back to how we can, what things that we can do to lessen the risk. We got the exercise and the relaxation. But interestingly, the breathing affects the two parts of we got two parts to our nervous system. We've got like the sympathetic, which is the one that sparks off the fight or flight response, and then we've got the parasympathetic, which brings in the relaxation response. So the in-breath is actually linked to the fight or flight and the sympathetic nervous system. So when we're feeling a bit panicky, we do a lot of breathing in quite often and not a lot of breathing out. So of course that actually increases the feeling of anxiety. So we can help control that by making more effort on the out-breath, so breathing out more than we're breathing in. So the out-breath will then stimulate that relaxation response. It's called the 7-11. I've actually got it on a handout, so Steve at the back has got it with some of our packs, so if you want to have one, he'll give you one as you go out. So you breathe in for the count of 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then you breathe out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Breathing out, you know, breathing in is like ready for action. Breathing out is, as you say, you can feel your body deflate, relax, start to relax. And I usually say to people, do this like 10 times. It's a very good one when people have been off sick with stress, anxiety, depression, they're coming back to work. And it's a way that you can learn to do it. And again, your brain kind of pattern matches. When I do this, I start to feel more relaxed. And you can start to add imagery, so like somewhere really nice. So when you're doing the breathing, you can form a picture in your mind of your favourite holiday place or a desert island or whatever it might be that makes you feel very relaxed. So it's a very good self-help tool. It doesn't cost anything. You can do it at work. You can do it anywhere. Nobody will know that you're doing it. So helpful. Life's not what it's supposed to be, it's what it is. And the way you cope with it is what makes the difference, which is very true. Things don't always go the way that we think they should have. And taking time out, doing something, taking time for you, whatever it might be. Nature's good. Getting outside and getting into nature is a good one. Not for everybody. Some people would rather be in front of the telly watching some sport, which is great. And then these are some useful links. The HSE stress standards. The HSE's got a very good site. Mood Gym. Now, the Mood Gym is a free online CBT, and they say in this day and age where perhaps it might be embarrassing to talk about feeling stressed or anxious or needing some help, there are some very good tools online now and some apps which I think Carol's going to show you. Here we are. Yes, the health trainers. So the health trainers. Do you want me to go through the? Shall I just? Do you want?
Yeah, what I wanted to do was just to make sure that everybody was aware of where you could get help. And as Di said, there's lots of online products, apps that you can have on your phone. So you can actually do that quite discreetly. Nobody would know what you're doing. Those of you that like to sit on your computer, you could do that then. But some people may feel that they do need to actually go and speak to somebody, and there is lots available locally. We have a health trainer service, which is just a low impact service where you can just go along, have a chat to the health trainers, and they will actually maybe sort out some breathing patterns, some relaxation patterns for you, just work with you. Chamber Health, which is part of the Chamber of Commerce, which I don't know if any of you are affiliated to, they will offer in-house health checks, etc., to come to your companies. I was also thinking of the under 25s that you have in your teams. There are a lot of young men, especially, that work in the construction industry. There is the Youth Trust, and there's also the newly formed IRIS, the Drug and Alcohol Services also, which will look at young people and support young people too. We are very fortunate on the Isle of Wight to have a very good increasing access to psychological therapies service, known as the IAP service, which is a very discreet mental health service where a therapist will work with you to sort out stress, etc. All of the things that Di has spoken about, but again, more on a formal basis. Your doctor, very busy doctors, but it is a point of call. Your practice nurse as well is also a very good port of call. You can also go under, if you have to go for any other checkups, etc., also mention that. But the one I think that is most useful, and having used that on a personal level too, is the mood gym. It's really a good way of just sorting things out, really, putting things into focus. So there's loads and loads of support there in various different forms to be accessed.
So thank you very much. Anybody got any questions? No? Thank you.